My fun, yeah. Which is not fun. Meanwhile, there was a meeting somewhere in the depth of Beirut, the dark. There was around 24 souls, all of them silent. A figure there broke the silence. بكرة انظر. أبو زهرة مش رح يخزلنا. لا روح. The man grunted. He'd better not, his face told. He was in his 40s. He was seated and he was tapping his fingers nervously on the table. He was bearded and had long gray hair tied in a ponytail. He was wearing an army jacket. He was tall and he had a beer belly. It was a big room by all means, big enough to accommodate everyone. Because everyone was there. L'Abedouar, Sheikh Al-Khattar, Abu Ghalib, Jiddo, and a whole bunch I had never seen before. Even Al-Ustaz Anwar. No doubt, due to some miraculous feat of engineering, was also there. And they were all tensed. No one was leaving his seat, but they were jittery, whispering among themselves. El-Abedouar was starting to think that he made a mistake coming here with only Raymond, his hard-of-hearing chauffeur. Shleikha was caressing an increasingly jittery sheikh. Jiddo was in his own bubble of despair, and nothing his companions could say could assuage the intensity of the black cloud he was under. A television set was on the table, turned on the news, on mute. Reporters were going insane at the general chaos that had engulfed the world. Nature was seething like a dying whale. The balance had been thrown off. It was snowing in Iraq and the Mediterranean was shrinking at an alarming rate. The masses broke into spontaneous rebellion. There is no end of time, for time is endless. But if anything approached the end of us as such as this, it remains to be seen. I told you it was fun. Bang! He banged the table, the long-haired man, and everyone was startled, and the bang rang throughout. No one spoke a word. They just looked down and were more anxious than ever. The long-haired man was finding it hard to hide his fury, looking straight ahead. Nothing in particular, because there was a veil of rage between him and the world. The door opened, and everyone was delivered for a second. But it was one of the men of Al-Ustaz Anwar coming in with more bad news. "Asaf al-Madrasa," said he as he went in hurriedly. Abu Ghalib nodded knowingly. Damn Israelis. The whole room went silent for a second. Then they all started murmuring amongst each other. The man in the army jacket sighed, exasperated, as he gently tilted back his head. Meanwhile, I was in the speeding SUV, and we were driving frantically, you see, because the Israeli jets were still trying to target us. Now, it was all very fast, but it kind of went like this. Boom! Then a louder boom! A massive clang, then a whoop, and a long screech, then I was gone. But, as common experiences show, there are these 2 or 3 seconds during an accident. They are so pregnant with so much details. The brain goes into a different time zone once it is faced with the increasing probability of death. One where you can study what each move would lead you to, and you would be faced with the frustration once you have made up your mind of how slow the response of your body is, until the point of impact, where it's like the end of an opera. What am I saying? There's nothing like it. This is a modern death by excellence, and nothing in nature is as horrible. Boxes of steel rattling around with pieces of delicate meat inside of them. So to be both brief and precise, what happened is this. The jets were on our track, and unless you are being shot at by myopic movie villains, chances are you simply cannot escape a fighting jet missile. Hey, chances are you simply cannot escape a fighting jet missile. The Israelis were impeded, of course, by the swarm of blue butterflies still following the 3 remaining cars. Shooting all 3 seemed like the best bet. So as was expected, the first boom took the first car. It flew like a pancake and fell flat on its back like a pancake. The second boom hit the second car on the side of it, and it swirled uncontrollably towards us, clanging like an iron bull into ours, and inadvertently taking us out of the way of the third boom, which was so close it sounded like a whoop. So we screeched out of the road and into whatever it was that was on our way. But I was not destined to go into whatever it was that was on our way, for a figure went into the car towards me with opened arms. It embraced me, lifted me up, and we both went out of the other end. The first thing I felt was that there was a lot of light. I could feel the light and the sound of debris from the explosion beneath my feet. Then a clear blue wave, increasingly a little darker than the shade of the sky, and it just shielded me from the world. And I was gone again. The last thing I heard was the awesomely deafening passing engine of a jet. Back in the big hall, people were starting to lose it. A moment ago, more bad news came in. The Israelis finished off the totality of the Mawkib. Doubt was starting to seep in. El Abedouar was distraught. Jiddo's hands were hiding his face. The rest were now screaming on each other. Some of them were still looking at the tall man with the ponytail, expecting, yet not getting, any sort of instructions. The tall man just rested his hand on his belly and stared into nowhere. Another knock on the door. Khairi Allah! Screamed Elistez Anwar, not in the mood for some bad news. The door opened, and from the crack of the door, 2 butterflies went in and flew around the room. Abu Zahra walked in with a smile all gloriously, his hand on his waist and his other holding me like a sack of potato on his shoulder. ما تواخذونا إنه نعمل شي برمي صغير تغيير جو. And he winked. And if I weren't unconscious as I hanged on his shoulder, I swear I would have heard a ding as he winked. Flonk! He dropped me to the floor like a sack of potato. Abu Zahra was so pleased with himself that he didn't notice I was in such bad shape. Shokis batata! Screamed Al-Abedouar. Abu Zahra apologized before inadvertently kicking me again. Another scream from the minions of Jiddo, and they all rushed towards me to save me. In Europe, they scream as they're a doctor in the house, and even doctors are reluctant. But here, we are all doctors. We're better than doctors. And all it takes is a little common sense, really. So the man that was me was unresponsive, so they tried to revive me clumsily by blowing in my mouth, moving my arms about like a hummingbird, then my legs like a ballet dancing frog. Someone was even messing with my hair, and another was doing a dance of health all on his own. hoping he can send enough positive energy to nurture me back to health. The tall man with the beer belly was exasperated. He said with severity, "Jibou lahon." The shell which I used to live in was brought to him. "Jalsou," he ordered. I was straightened out and I was now facing him through no effort of mine. He stood up, closed his eyes, extended his hand, and the blood coursing through my veins went suddenly white and explosive. A sharp, strident breath, and my lungs sprinkled white from all over. I fell, and as I was lying on the floor going, I realized I was breathing. I looked around, then I looked up. I see the man who had healed me. مين انت؟ أنا المسيح. مين انت؟ مين؟ مسيح! Jesus screamed in my face. I went silent for a while because what do you say after that? كيفك؟ يا مسيح؟ في يكون أحسن. أنت كيف؟ كمان في يكون أحسن. Jesus was silent for a while. أنت مين؟ حيدر رسولي. ما تكذب علي، بعرف اسمك. بدي أعرف مين أنت، شو مهمتك؟ I looked around and I see all of my dead friends. He continued. هيدي مهمتك؟ كلهم هون. لك ما لمنظر. The warlords were ashamed and were doing circles with their feet. أرتت حوش, he whispered in hatred. إذا مهمتك تعمل سلام بين الميتين بلبنان، تفضل. أنا جهزت لك إياه. يلا. تفضل. تفضل شو؟ ارتجل! He said with a stare that was too scary to ignore. So I looked around and they were all waiting for me to speak. All smiles and expectations. Okay. مرحبا جميعا. اختصر! Screamed Jesus. Okay.